Hello, and welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Oh dear. Oh, I've not paid attention to much news this week, to be honest. It's just so boring now. However, we can actually run through the Ukraine and get as deeper than anybody's ever been in their life. It's so, and it's not a major problem. It's just quick and to the point. We'll have a look at a couple of images in a minute on that sort of premise, so that's going to be interesting. We've got some data. It's sort of like the childcare curriculum, and we're going to have a little look at that as well because it's obscene. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. I can't believe that they've all gone for it, but on your behalf, you know, on your behalf, this is going on. It's just outrageous. So, without further ado, gigs are on, and we'll set. Andrew, how you doing? Slipknot, hello. Mind Racer, evening. Mind Racer, you're not a mod. It looks like they've knocked you all off. I don't know what U2's playing at. You're not coming up as a mod there, so I don't know what's happened there. It said you were when I left it. And it kicked Jace off as well. So I don't know what to make of that. Let's hope we've got somebody. Public notice says testing 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could count it up. Space Op per mic, evening to you. That's quite a godful, that, me old China. Matsy11 says, on time, yeah, evening, Sean and all. Good evening to you too. Hi, Paul, how are you doing? Debbie, how are you? Where were you last week? Oh, who were it Treen that were missing? One of you were missing, weren't you? Who were missing? Paul says, good evening. It's good evening to you. Public notice. Jason at Nottingham Crown Court. Case dismissed. Yeah, I've got your data. Well done. Did they get costs and damages? That'll be interesting. Jason's back on. Right, so obviously I don't have control over my YouTube at all. They just make it up as they go along. So, interesting. Very interesting indeed why they're doing that. But obviously they're not giving me access to that anymore. For some reason. I don't know why. Are they actually breaking my right to identify as fantastic and amazing? In which case, they're not really allowed to do this to somebody that's fantastic and amazing, are they? We might have to look into that in case they're falling foul of the self-identity nonsense that they've got cracking on going everywhere, you know? So Debbie were here last week. It was Treen that were in here then last week. And it doesn't look like she's here again, but she is usually late. So sorry, Debbie. It's not you, it was Treen. I hope she's alright, because if she's going to be missing for 2 weeks, we might have to set out an hunting party, see where she's alright or not, you know? Slipknot says, Mew was missing as well, was it? Absent without leave, was it? Indeed. Ah, well, there you go. This absenteeism is no good, you know. You can't be absent unless I say so. That's what the schools do. You've got the unauthorised absences, if I remember rightly. Public note says, well, you know, Jason, he ain't going to stop fighting for his baby. So did he get any damages and costs paid? Or how did that go, public notice? What kind of success? It's good that he got it dismissed, but obviously you'd be expecting some kind of reparation on that. Reparation, a buzzword from the curriculum of the insane. We're going to have a look at in a minute, reparations. Now, where did that language come from originally? Because that's interesting. We're going to have a little look at here and just show this cult of priesthood for what it is by its own words. So that is going to get quite interesting as well. So yeah, we'll get truant officer around and knit nurse. Well, do you think she might have knits? Yeah, we'll have to get knit nurse around as well, I think. So it looks like Jace again is the only moderator. I don't know what the hell's happened there, Ray. Have you fell out with YouTube? Have you been calling them names and things like that? You know, they're a bit touchy. Anyway, so this just a bit of where are we going here first? Let me have a look. I forgot. Oh, Ukraine. So this might cock up because last week, sorry, I'm rabbiting on thinking you're looking at the images, and you weren't looking at any of the images, were you? Because I didn't transition it, so it weren't my fault. But I didn't realise that until after, so my apologies. So let me see if I can get it right this time. So now if I'm not... Oh. Right, so you should be seeing what I'm seeing. I pull that off and we're here. So let's look at the Ukraine in a nutshell. But this is the deepest you'll ever need to go. Well, look at that. Zelensky. Look at the bottom, Lubavitch.com. So this is Lubavitch bigging himself up. And they're giving him what they believe is worthy because of his actions. Okay, that's what it's about. There's your man, the actor. There's his best friends. And remember, this Chabad Lubavitch is just a front. It's only a front to keep the three Abrahamic religions despising each other. Because as long as everybody thinks that at the top of it are actually these guys, we don't get to see that it's actually much bigger than just that. They've now got full control of their own. So, you know, they're just front boys, but they need everybody to see them faces so that it keeps that anger and hatred for those that are into the old religions, blaming each other. You know, of course, Muslims are at a point where they go, well, yeah, okay, well, yeah, we know that they're bad, but they said we're all right, so we'll go with it. Yeah, let's go with it. Christians are just ridiculous at the moment, and they're going with anything because they're scared to say any different. So there's your Zelensky. No, that's not good. Hang on, we're going to have to get rid of that now because I've cocked it up again. Here we go again. There he is. He's got the book. Lubavitch.com. They're not hiding it. Oh, look! Well, look at that. Can you believe it? Who's that? Is that not Vlad the Impaler? And look at his mates. Pray tell, what we're supposed to make of that? Because the writing's on the wall, to be honest. It's a theatre, it's a game. Oh, look. There he is again. He better start snogging, I think. And he's getting hats on to cover his sins from the Most High through the crown chakra. So that's why they cover it up. That's why they have hats. It's nothing to do with anything other than making sure that the big cheese doesn't see him. Now then, this fella. This guy's really important in relation to pulling together the two Mashiachs. Sheldon Adelson. Look at that. Kiss the ring. This is how high up this guy is. So at the moment we've got Ben Joseph, who's doing the war in order to bring their Messiah Ben David. Okay? This is the man. Guess who this man finances? Donald Trump. Donald Duck. Kisses the ring. A bit of that there. So, I mean, that image is sometimes... It's just so much better at giving us the big picture. So I want to just... let me come back here now. Right. So, we're going to look at this story, but just before we look at that, I just want to, and we're going to play a teacher now. So, I don't want you picking your nose back at class. No looking up under Flossie's skirt on to next year and all that. I want your best behaviour. Because it's essential. You should be able to see that there. Now, when you get back into the ancient times, the centre of the universe wasn't the sunshine. It wasn't even the earth. It was the pole star. As the North Star said there. And the reason why this so-called little image is ancient is because when you follow the plough, Ursa Major, around the book, because if you want to look for the pole star, just look at the pan and follow that right up. There's your pole star. And that image shows you the journey of Ursa Major in relation to the 4 seasons. So this is why. So when they say it's a sun symbol, it's not the sunshine in the sky. That's the centre of the ancient universe. And it still should be, in truth. So you've seen that, you've got that in your minds. Let me just come back to this. And bang. So now I'm just going to give you, because this is important, because it's simplicity, but it shows you exactly what they're actually doing. Now, if you remember, I've spoke about when the Templars received the knowledge and the treasures of how to build this banking system, the Magi said to them, "You're going to control this system, but only we understand the true meaning of the cross." Right? That's what they were told. So the Magi were pretty much presenting the fact that the Templars, whatever they were still under the command of these Magi. So when you go off that image we've just looked at, what it's depicting here. So there's your pole star. And you've got your line of control coming down from the heavens to the black sun in the centre of the earth. Right? So that's the old ancient depictions. And the Freemasonry symbolises that in the compass. Okay, that's its measure. So the compass as a symbol is measuring that. Pole star. The black sun in the earth. Okay? So the sun, as we know it, generates the energy of the magnetic fields. But within the earth, the same thing's going on, but we call it the black sun. Now, the square is about the measure of the plane. Freemasonry being the 5th science, it's its job to build this new system that were given to them by the Magi. And that is this plane here. Okay? So this is what they're building. Instead of control, so they're removing control from the heavens and giving it to themselves on the earth. That's the true meaning of the cross. And they're putting everybody on it as a sacrifice. Right? Are you starting to understand a bit of symbolism as it operates in these secret societies? So this, the plane measured by the square. Freemasonry is the 5th science. That's what it's doing. Building a flat plane of control on this earth. Yeah? So there's your creation, heaven and earth. There's your world. So there you go. It's important because now we're going to have a look at what it is that they're doing in order. Oh, I'm full of shit. What's going on here? Who's been throwing chalk at teacher? Cut it out this minute. Outrageous, you are. All of you. Your detention if you carry on. So does that make sense? Alright, so that's Stop picking your nose at the back there, I can see you. Right. So there you go. That's the whole game that's going on. Bypassing the earth, creation, heaven and earth, and creating the world as a flat plane control. Yeah, square and compass. Pretty much bags it there for you. And of course, the 33 degree, they class it as 33 and a third, so they'll tend to aim for living at an house that's 333, because it represents 33 and a third. Right? And that's referencing, of course, to the Genesis 1 is the creation, heaven and earth. Revelation 8 is the destruction of that. And it's by what, a 33 and a third percentage, a fraction of what's going to be removed, right? So, putting you on the cross, and not themselves, what they're doing is making sure that the 33 and a third that's going to be removed off the earth ain't them. It's you. And you're jumping on it, yeah, because you're sucking in to the garbage that the priesthood pumps out. You're dancing. Okay? You're dancing to the tune of the flat plane. Yeah, and they're throwing you on the cross as a sacrifice. So that's that. Now we're not going to say, oh, that's the real truth of the world. This is how they're playing. This is their shit. This is their mechanic to mimic Genesis 1. Alright? We've gone through the Babel as I see it. We don't need to do that again. So everything that we call the New World Order is, in effect, the architect is making sure that the ruling or the so-called divine lot don't die. We know a lot of them will, but by playing out this game, this mimic, to test mankind, to see where you really are in your art, is the game. And in doing so, they're going to try and make sure that the 33 and a third percent that's gone has nothing to do with them. You get it? That's why they're digging all their holes. That's why they've got the tunnels and the cities underground. That's why they want a space station, which is also spoken about by Nostradamus, or whatever it is that flies around every now and again. So, hopefully you've got that. So now let's start to have a look at what it is that they're doing now in this time in relation to cementing the horizontal plane aspect of control, and of course throwing you on the cross. That's already begun, has it not? So they've got the cross in place. They now have to put it into a physical manifestation so that it does govern you, yeah, so that you do consent to it, and therefore in the spiritual law you've all consented, they can have it. They're allowed to make this, to show, and we're witnessing this. We're actually witnessing the reality of spiritual law as opposed to what garbage everybody's believed to be spiritual law. When in fact what it is the rules of the game of whichever religious order you belong to. Yeah, you think about that and give that a bit of contemplation, you'll really start to understand the game a little bit better. And of course, as I've discussed many times, if you are following a religion, it's because you're taking your input and your points of reference as to who you are from outside of yourself. Okay? If you go with the teacher, the man, he came and he said, the kingdom of his father is within. So if you're not taking your references as to how you live, how you exist, what you do, what you don't do, if you're taking it from the outside, you're following, you're copying. You're taking it from within, your conscious is active. You know, that's your higher self putting you straight. That's who it is. It's just your own higher self. A deeper level of your source of who you are communicating with you as your conscience. Psychopaths don't have that. So they're devoid of that depth of spiritual connection. Probably because they're trapped to you. Or they give up their avatar to be possessed by the entities of the Quilpoth realm. So, yeah, we've explored all this stuff. So hopefully Jay says, Sean Ross talks about the horizontal of vertical rule of Pharaoh. Yeah, absolutely. But we have to also remember, we talk about Pharaoh, which is fair enough because we're talking about the dynasties that use the term. But there's an older Egypt than this shenanigans, and this lot that we know as pharaohs came out of Sumer. You know? Some say that they were the Anunnaki. Whatever names they were given, they were just people that existed at the time that had power, and they shifted over into Egypt. Probably after it had been come back from the deluge that had covered it up, basically. And so they sort of took over what was already. A bit like in the Americas. You know, you look into the images from way back. America were full of cities, inhabited cities. Whether that were Native Americans per se, or whether they were brought up from the South, who knows. But it's pretty clear that, you know, a big part of when they got into America was demolishing the existing architecture. Just like they've been doing all over the world, especially Europe, and then in Iraq, they've just demolished everything, and they've used ISIS to do that. So it's all been about demolishing architecture in order to support this idea that we're actually evolving from cavemen and monkeys with bows and arrows, when it's pretty clear there's nothing new under the sun, and everything that's going on today has happened before, probably more than once. Maybe slightly different technological advancements, but the same thing, which is why you see helicopters and such on Egyptian walls in Abydos, which is far older, if you date it by the floods that are visible in some of those monuments. A lot older than the Sumerian elites that we see as Egypt. So it's quite possible that a lot of the hieroglyphs, etc., were nothing to do with that lot. They were actually older. We don't know. But suffice to say, this empire has never died. It moves. And their history then presents to us that one died, another began. No. When they're destroying one over here, it's because they've set it up over here. Exactly like they're doing now with China. You know, the social credit, all that system, they're going for it. They're going to go for it now. We're going to have a look at this piece now, just to support that data. So I just need to go in here and with the map. Oh. Shall I transition that? There we go. Hey, it's working tonight. So, what am I doing here? Oh, I know what I'm doing here. Cocking it up. Right. So you can see that now. It says the mask is off. WF's Klaus Schwab, who of course he's a child that came out of his nappies in about 2019, and Daddy Henry Kissinger let him loose upon the world. So that's who Klaus Schwab is in my eyes, just an infant talking infantile stuff, but using good language, which is bad language, but anyway. So Klaus Schwab declares China a role model. Alright, so you all see what's going on in China right now, can't we? Once upon a time, the Soviets had a tightly controlled network of internationalists known as the Comintern to promote the communist model to Europe and beyond. So that is what was going on. This is the reason why they had the Second World War, because the Bolsheviks were spreading outside of Russia and all over Germany and into other parts of Europe, including Blighty. Yeah, we had a lot of Bolsheviks here because of the death of all our men in the First World War and the influx of the opened pogroms in Russia that had been captured when Catherine the Great, the Prussian, took over the Balkans. So there we go. As it stands now, the Red Chinese have got them one better. They've got Klaus Schwab. Well, Klaus Schwab is a Kissinger adoptee and has been for a very long time. His father, as you know, was an SS officer. It says, the world, and this is Fox News, it says, according to the World Economic Forum founder and chair Klaus Schwab, recently sat down for an interview with the Chinese state media outlet and proclaimed that China was a role model for other nations Schwab84 made these comments during an interview with CGTN's Tian Wei on the sidelines of last week's APEC CEO Summit in Bangkok, Thailand. Oh, they have been having a lot of meetings, haven't they? Schwab said he respected China's tremendous achievements in modernising its economy over the last 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries. Well, of course, China owns the most of the United States debt. Yeah, Saudis had a lot of it before, didn't they? The petrodollar, which is different to the dollar being the reserve currency. It's a separate thing and it's based on debt. I think it's all... So basically, if the same applied to China as did in Saudi Arabia, the elites went into China under the front of America and said basically, we'll take your oil out for you, we'll refine it, etc., etc. You have to sell it in the dollar. But this is the petrodollar because, of course, to do that, they also have to buy something like 40% of the United States debt. So the Saudis did that, which is why they were raised to the top. Because if it hadn't been so, then the Western nations or the elites by whichever nation they chose would have just took over Saudi Arabia and pumped the oil for themselves. It was important that these setups actually got each nation to confirm that they would also purchase, say, 40% of the United States debt. This is how this system's gone on for so long. I think it's a role model for many countries, Schwab said, before qualifying that he thinks each country should make its own decisions about what system it wants to adapt. Well, he's talking about countries. That's meaning, then, the bankrupt governments or cabinet in our situation, which, of course, is run by the Privy Council, which is a playground for the billionaires. Right? So he's saying we have to make our own decisions. Well, we haven't decided that we've accepted this. We've got an unelected bunch of cronies in there now that have made the decision for him. So obviously, if he's using the term country, it's distinct from nation. And that, again, when you get into the word wizardry, it's important that we understand this stuff. Then we can start to understand what they're really saying and not what we think they're saying. He says, I think we should be very careful imposing systems. Oh, do you? But the Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for quite a number of countries, Schwab said. Yeah? I mean, you know, it has zero freedom, low social mobility, social credit scores and constant government surveillance. And now they're all locked down. They're all locked in the kennel. And there's riots going on now because the workers, when they called it down, they were made at first to stay in the factories that they were in. They broke out of one particular one to go home. So, you know, there's definitely a mood in China to break this stranglehold that the Queen Bolshevik at the moment has got over Chinese people. So calling for a Chinese model is a bit ridiculous, isn't it? It says China, in fact, is a giant prison, complete with slave labour, sweatshops, low wages, continuous lockdowns and actual logai or gulags. Challenge the government in any way and you'll be packed off to one for years upon years in no time, exactly like they did in Russia. In the case of the Uyghurs just being the wrong nationality is enough for such punishment. We know they're doing it to Muslims as well and sterilising them. Because the Bolshevik state is anti-religious. It's the uber atheist ideology, which is why and what they did in Russia to create the Soviet Union. They removed any idea that we might have as man that there is actually a higher power than us and it's got a few rules we're supposed to be obeying and failed to do so at your own peril. So Bolshevism has always been about removing that idea and putting you straight into materialism. But of course, that materialism in essence is handed to the state so that it owns everything and then you're just basically given what they decide. But like he said here, you step out of line, you go into jail. That's the Chinese model that Klaus Schwab's talking about. Yeah, so we don't really want to be going in there. And the Comintern that he's talking about is, as we discussed a few live streams ago, how China is trying to get into all the Chinese that are across the world and try and get them to operate as propagandists and even secret societies for pushing China as a great thing. Well, you know, anybody with a brain, 2 eyes and ears can see pretty much that it's an absolute garbage. And as we looked at the other week, the images of the carbon output on the globe, there's only 2 places pumping it out. India and China. Now, go back a couple of years ago, and certain parts of the US, you'd find it mainly where they had big industry. But even that today, and I've seen this for the last 6 months at least, the United States is not really showing any signs of CO2 production on industry. So straight away there then, you can see that what we're about to look at following this is absolute garbage. Because all these reparations, all these contracts that they're setting up for us to pay out of our tax, and of course, because we're already in debt, when they attach this to our system, it's a debt that they're adding to our system. You know, it's usually, you're never going to get out of this debt system if we don't stop it ourselves. And, you know, they're taking 916 billion they took off us last year, and they're saying that they have no money, we have no money, they're skint, and we have to go into further debt. So these reparations that they're talking about, which is that we're now going to pay for any damage by wind and rain in any of these third world countries. It makes you wonder what they're actually doing in these third world countries, because on the one hand they've just shotted them all, but on the other hand they're throwing them out everywhere by the countries that they're putting all this money into. So this money that they're putting into these so-called second grade countries is not actually for the people that used to live there. They're getting thrown out and encouraged to go and be an immigrant somewhere else in these nations where they're taking all our money off us. Because you're letting them, of course. We don't want to bore ourselves with any more of that, but I think you get the picture. This is where this guy's going. We looked at Sunak. Sunak's up this guy's ass. You know what I'm saying? I mean, his tongue's right up there. Sunak's going to do what this guy said. Sunak, we didn't vote him in. Truss has already took us one step back into Europe by signing us into PESCO and putting our military under the European Union. And what are our military doing? They're over in the Ukraine, and as we've just seen, Ukraine is theatre. It's absolute nonsense. It might as well be an Hollywood movie. And, you know, it's got two actors. Putin, Zelensky. And unfortunately, this cabinet run by the Privy Council, while we have big ears waiting to be king, saying nothing apart from backing what this infantile tosspot is pumping out. So Charles is letting this go down as well. You know? We have to start looking at it. As I said, we have a period of time now before before he takes the coronation oath and ascends to the throne. He isn't the king. And we have no legitimate, contracted cabinet politicians that are running the show that have to take one blind bit of notice of what the electorate has said and what it wants. And that's clear. They're moving us back into Europe. They're starting to pick it apart, but in the background, because they know that you're focused to everything that's just been going on in the last 2.5 years, or 3 years almost now. We're nearly there. It's nearly a 3-year gig. And we know the experiment ends next year, in March anyway, but luckily, Blighty being pretty multicultural, they certainly didn't get the way EU, which is why they need to get our army under EU, because then it's the EU dictating how our military acts if they're shoved on our streets. But more importantly, it'll be the European militaries that they all try and put on here. That's when things change, chaps, and that's when you males out there are going to have to decide, are you a male or are you a trans ginger fruitcake who, I can't do that. Are you getting this picture? So militia mind is important that people start to get that mindset in their mind, because that is a right afforded to you on England. And that would keep you in service of law as opposed to buckling down to policy, which is currently what's going on. Now then, let's just have a little look at what the Commonwealth Secretary-General welcomes historic outcome on loss damage at COP27. So we're not being awkward, we're not conspiratorial. This is just going through what they've decided on our behalf in the last couple of months. It says, following 2 weeks of extensive negotiations at the UN Wind and Rain Conference, nearly 200 countries have agreed on a set of key outcomes, including the establishment of a fund to address loss and damage due to wind and rain. Welcoming the developments, the Commonwealth Secretary-General, Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, KC, stated. Well, that's interesting as well, because a lot of stuff that they decided happened in Glasgow. So now, we know Glasgow hates the English, like, with a vengeance, because they believe that England does everything against them. Just wait and see what Glasgow's done. So now we're allowed to call you Jock the Who's up there in Glasgow. Because you have just allowed something far worse in your Glasgow. So, but we'll get that to another point. But you're very naughty. You're not hard as nails anymore. You're puffs. In fact, you're nearly as bad as the Scousers. Because they've done nothing but bend over backwards throughout the whole shenanigans. And are no longer allowed to call themselves Northerners. Anyway, so if you carry on Glasgow, you won't be able to be called Northerners anymore neither. We'll have to put you down in Kent. Or something like that. And us Lancastrians will be moving up there. And nicking up castles. Because we will just kick out all the bloodlines. Of course, I'm joking, because you couldn't even do it, so we probably won't be able to do it either. So he says, this is Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, KC, it's a KC, look, stated, I welcome the historic outcome from the COP27 summit and applaud the tireless negotiators who have helped bring about this significant step forward. This is an encouraging day for all Commonwealth member countries. Remember the Commonwealth that Oliver Cromwell set up, ladies and gentlemen. Including wind, vulnerable small states, least developed countries, developing countries, and indeed for all the world. On the cross. The Commonwealth stance on loss and damage has been unequivocal. The Commonwealth heads of government meeting met in Kigali, Rwanda earlier this year in June. They were united in their call for scaled-up action on financing to address loss and damage resulting from wind and rain. Of course they are going to do. They're the ones who are going to get it. They're going to be the beneficiaries. Why did they hold it in Rwanda? Well, obviously, there's a big part of the priesthood controlling Rwanda. Especially so after the 1990 genocide, when they got all the Muslim Africans to kill all the Christian Muslims. How many of you know that? All those that were massacred and genocided in Rwanda were Christians. So not Christianity now running Rwanda, it's priesthood. This follows on a long history of global advocacy on wind and rain, ever since Commonwealth leaders issued the Langkawi Declaration on the Environment in 1989, which underscored the need for worldwide collaboration on wind and rain to avert permanent and irreversible damage to our environment and way of life. However, while I welcome today's developments, the threats around us continue to intensify. We must work together to ramp up climate action and ambition, recognising that we are all in the same storm. Yeah, pulling on the horizontal. And the only way for us to survive is by steering in a common direction and taking bold, courageous actions together. On the lateral, on the plane. Yeah, this is what this is all about. They're getting rid of the heaven to earth and putting us on the plane. The cross is built. So that's that load of nonsense. So I'll come and have a look at what you geezers are doing. Is that making sense? Let's have a look. Oh, you've been chatting. So Jace is here. Yeah, you're the only one again. We've just changed all that. So YouTube, obviously, they like you, Jace. They like you for some reason. You're not paying them cash, are you? So Mark says evening. So Debbie says she was here last week. Yep. Yeah, we will send truant officer around. I think Treen has been very naughty lately. I hope she's all right. Judge awarded cost to Jason, but when we got to court, case had been dismissed. Was an administrator issue will contact. Right. Okay, that's clever. But if they've dismissed the case against him, how can they not pay? I'll have to look at that. I don't know. That's interesting. That's a blagging it. But at least he's been dismissed. So if they've got the child back, all's well and good. That's most important than any paper money. Andrew says, Putin has pictures with the same guys. Well, we've just shown him. Putin and Zelensky. Yeah, at every president since Carter. We don't see it here on Blighty, of course, because we are the most secretive nation on the planet. And have been for a very long time. Debbie says, I'll tell you to kiss my ring, Ray. Kick off, so I'll be quiet. Are you too full of that again? Ray's gone dark. Well, he's not showing him up as a thingy, and I've just set it up to that before I come on. So obviously YouTube don't want me to play. Four-way mixing with the heterodyne with phi. Okay. It also symbolises the debt credit ledger too. Well, debt is the main game of this lateral system, isn't it? And the reason why it's a cross is because it becomes the oversoul to the heaven, earth, and cutting off your connection completely with your connection to the to Genesis 1. They want you fixed in Genesis 2 and the garden, because light and dark in the garden, same Lord. Why would you have to add a name? We know if you add a name to your given name, it turns it into something else because it's attached it to something else. So it's no different with putting the word Lord in front of the term God, because it doesn't do so in Genesis 1. This is really important stuff, and I know it's probably going to be difficult for some people to acknowledge, but once you acknowledge it, you then reconsider your stance, things are going to change. I am sure of it. But anyway, we don't need to get on to that. Sean Ross. Sean Ross is just very angry, isn't he? He hates everybody. If you're called Swiss, he doesn't like you, which is just ridiculous. You can't let... with that ideology, you're then within your right to say everything that the British Empire did is England's fault. Well, it's clearly not. The British Raj seems to have the most power at the moment. Pakistan is a British imperial creation. It wasn't called Pakistan until it was divided up. Yeah, which gave them control of Kashmir as well, from both the Indian side and the Pakistani side. So all that, you're under the empire. The United States, it's under the empire. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China. But China came from the Holy See itself. It's pulling together now with the Western system because it's all under the control of the imperial side of things, the Holy See. That's been the elephant in the room forever. The Holy See. Which is why you could have had priests and members of the Catholic Church for centuries comfortable, because they were being given one particular thing. Yeah, there were a big kick-off with the Reformation, and a lot of Catholics of the day, because everybody were Catholic, said, wait a minute, you're off your head, that's garbage. You can't sell the absolution of sin. You can't do it, and rightly so. So this system, this whole, the grabbing of the West by this system that does actually hail from the East, has been going on for a long time. And they've just kept everybody comfortable enough to not rock the boat until they got Vatican II, and that really did rock the boat for the Catholic system. And the introduction of Freemasonry in the 1700s changed everything for the Protestants. So from the get-go, the Protestants were pretty much scuppered. And then once the Church of England was set up, the nonconformists again split again. So it was just split after split. And then you get Cromwell. Split completely, in came the moneylenders again. First World War, they killed all the men. All the lodges were taken over by this influx from Russia. Same in the United States. The Schofield Bible changed existing Freemasonry in the United States and turned them all to evangelicals or Zionists. And then eventually, because of course the Church of England vicars were having it here. They wouldn't take it on at all. They were not having it. And it took Blair to actually finally dismantle the power of the old ideology Church of England moral code. Blair did that in his tenure, continued by Cameron, and probably just carried on ever since, because the cabinet here under the Privy Council is running the no-hide script, just like it's being pushed in everywhere. So and the Islamists are just doing it in Islam. And of course, all they have to do in Islam is shift the Sharia off the Quran. And that way, the Muslims are not going to see it because they don't read the Quran. And if they do, like Christians and everybody else, Jews, you're told what it means. You're not given the opportunity to see it for yourself and take on board what your inner self absorbs and as a meaning. No, nobody today is allowed to think for themselves. The kingdom of within is banished. Everything has to come from this Noahide. And so I've been looking into it again this week, and it's terrifying. Back in the day, when the flu were going on, there were a lot of reports about millions of guillotines being imported by Obama, and I think even when Bush were into the United States, and everybody were flapping, rightly so, and then images of mass plastic coffins everywhere. But when you get into these sub-laws, decapitation is exactly what they intend to carry out. So, it makes these past images, there's method to this madness, and it weren't just put out there as we all sort of thought it might be, just to install fear in everybody to get them to take the shot, which they didn't. We were a lot wiser then. They didn't have the energy, enough people that would fall for it. Obviously, this time round, which is 10 years after, when they kicked it off almost, they'd obviously dumbed you down even more, or at least a big majority of the population, because this time it went on. So Sean Ross is an interesting guy, but he's an exceptionally angry guy because he just attacks everything in Switzerland. When, of course, just like London, you create a place where the money men can have a bit of a free reign. They're gonna move there. It doesn't mean everybody that are in them nations are part of it. And surely we're getting to that point now where we can see this. That it's actually, that is what's going on. Everybody is deceived. Everything they believe, everything they think they're doing is absolute garbage, and it's been manipulated so. So nobody today is operating according to Genesis 1. Nobody. Who's watching the Wahhabi Cup? Swiss money versus Arab money. All of the clubs have the same owner. But it's not Swiss money, is it? It's the banking system that exists in Switzerland. If you don't get your language right, then what's been going on all over the third world is attacking England, the English people, Scottish people, the Welsh people, for the sins of the empire. Same with the United States. You're all in it. You're all in it. Africans are in it. If you're coming out of your country as an immigrant, you're a component of the British Empire, specifically in terms of occupation. Many are indentured servants, so you're under contracts to act in accordance with whatever little group it is that's advising you and so-called helping you. You'll be a charity, of course, when you get into the country you want to get into. They're the ones that make sure you operate according to their agenda. So there is no such thing today as an innocent tribe, cult, religion, ideology. Everything has been shafted, the whole sheen. And for Islam, it's only a case of shifting the Sharia off the Quran. And we've explored that. Done and dusted. You're all kafir if you're following that Sharia, regardless of what bullshit's going in your logos. So this is where we're at. Head chopping stuff. This is where they're at. Treen's here. How you, Treen? We missed you last week. Are you alright, kid? But chopping off heads, decapitation, is not a fallacy. And of course, for years I thought, well, it's decapitation of title of self, you know what I mean? Furthering you down into this legal trickery. But it would appear there is at the back end of that a real idea that they want to start lobbing heads off if you fall foul. And everybody is going to fall foul. Because if Muslims are following the Sharia and the whispers that you're getting in their ear and carry out what it is they're being encouraged to do, once you've carried that out, you're going to be judged because you've not followed your book. You've sinned against their terms. You're next. And it comes up the pyramid. Boom, boom, boom. Off you get chopped. And there's going to be nobody left. basically, apart from the ants they require and the slaves they require for their sexual depravities, you know, because as long as they can pump out babies, that's all they're interested in. Your babies for their pleasure. Get your hopes off in the book of Revelation. Well, yeah, exactly. Does it actually say that in Revelation? Because that is exactly what they're doing. That is what they're going to do. And it's 33 1/3% that they are waiting to be removed off the earth. And they just want to make sure it's not them. So they've created the systems. You've identified it with each system, and none of you are operating according to the system and its morals at all. You're off. And you've not seen it because you jingle jangle. Oh, look what we've got. Look what we're going to be. They like whoever. Dumbasses. The lot of you. If you're sucking into that. Yeah, the book of Revelation is being played out. Yeah. And I said this to somebody the other day. You know, well, they were prophets. I said, what are they prophets? They're script writers. You know, I could write a script today and say it's a prophecy. If the secret societies saw it at value, they then, as fifth scientific section of the great architect, the great work of the ages, the Masons would then build that prophetic system. So is it prophecy or is it script writing? You know what I'm saying? Again, logic, reason, apply it to that concept. Is it really prophecy? Or is it script writing? That the fifth science, Freemasons, build in the physical manifest. Yeah? Horizontal. That's what it's doing. So I hope that makes sense to you. Because all these, you know, these Masons. So if you've got Uncle Albert's there and he's going to lodge, he doesn't know this. He only knows how to get to the lodge and how to come out of lodge pissed and get in a taxi. Oh, that's it. He knows nothing else. So it's no use, you know, telling him he's a dick and he's dumbass and, you know, all this hoity-toity stuff he's carried on all his life, he's just garbage. Because it's better he realises it today than when he pops his clogs. Innit, really. So, cruel to be kind, as they say. It's a cruel love, but it is actually love, is to bring somebody right that's off track. Which is, of course, the opposite of that is having your kids identify as a bat and then crying their eyeballs out if anybody says, well, no, you don't look like a bat, lad. You look like a little boy. Or a little girl. No, this new system now, you're not allowed to do that. You've got to accept what the fruitcakes say. And that pans right up to Kissinger's little bitch, Claus Schwab, does it not? So it's quite simple, really. But until you start getting to grips with your own responsibility for your own actions, thoughts, and therefore how you play and which side you're playing for, you're going to carry on being under this nonsense. And fear is the biggest game. Because fear exists in the mind. The mind has one job. Just keep you alive. The trickster, the magician is in the mind. That's what the terror teach you. If you're fixing your mind, you've had it. You've had it because the magician is going to undo any ideas you get from the heart because it's scared that you might lose your life, you might lose your liberty, you might lose your house, you might lose your car. Yeah, you might lose a bit of paper money or a bit of gold. That's what the magician's playing out. Wherever you're at as a being, that magician is in there to make sure that what it is that you will doesn't get demolished. Do you understand that concept as well? You know, so you're stuck. If you're in the mind, if you live in your mind, you've had it. You're going down. You're going to downstairs in this game. So Paul says younger sister's inquest tomorrow at Bolton Coroner's Court. Should be interesting to see what garbage they come up with. Make sure you record it. Don't tell them you recorded it. Just record it. Because then you'll know. Because people need to know how these inquests go. Because in most cases, people go through this stuff on their own. It's only your family knows what's going on. Everybody needs to know what's going on in these places because they're not operating as they should do. They're operating just, aren't they? And not faz. So there we go. Right, now what we're going to do next. Let me have a look. Okay. So let's, because I know we all know we hear this climate change, this, and he's done it again. Why does it do that? Window capture. Ultimate. So just put it there. Then we should get ultimate guide. There we go. Done. Oh yeah, I'm getting better. At least there's that to look forward to. Right. So we all know, we've heard the mantra, but do you actually know what it is they're doing with this, the system, and how it's going to actually work? Because it's important. Now this is from their own mouth again. It's carbon credits. The ultimate guide to understanding carbon credits. Okay. This is, what date are we on with this? It's not giving us a date, so I don't know when this will put out. Is it giving us a date? No, it's not. Carboncredits.com is the website anyway. Carbon Markets 101. The carbon market allows investors and corporations to trade both carbon credits and carbon offsets simultaneously. Note the term corporations. Isn't that your birth certificate? So it's you, your person. Yeah? Not as a man, but on person, you're a corporation. So you're going to be in this by default. This mitigates the environmental crisis while also creating new market opportunities. So there's no intention of giving up the money game for them. They're just taking it off you. New challenges nearly always produce new markets, and the ongoing wind and rain crisis and rising emissions are no exception. And as we've already looked at, I tried to find them images, but I've put them on my external hard drive and I didn't have time. But I'm going to do it again. I'm going to show the whole globe this time, so that you know, including the United States. We are not giving off any emissions. The only two places on this globe that are constantly giving out disgraceful amounts of carbon emissions is India in the north and China in the northwest. It's bred with all this nonsense. That's where the big industry is. So they're the only two countries that should be paying in this reparations gig that the priesthood's got going. It says renewed interest in carbon markets is relatively new. International carbon trading markets have been around since the 1997 Kyoto Protocols. But the emergence of new regional markets have prompted a surge of investment. In the United States, no national carbon market exists, and only one state, California, has a formal cap and trade program. The advent of new mandatory emissions trading programs and ongoing consumer pressure have driven companies to turn to the voluntary market for carbon offsets. Changing public attitudes on climate change and carbon emissions have added a public policy incentive. Despite an ever-shifting background of state, federal and international regulations, there's more need than ever for companies and investors to understand carbon credits. This guide will introduce you to carbon credits and outline the current state of the market. It will also explain how credits and offsets work in currently existing frameworks and highlight the potential for growth. Carbon credits, offsets and markets. An introduction. The Kyoto Protocol of 1997 and the Paris Agreement of 2015 were international accords that laid out international CO2 emission goals, with the latter ratified by all but 6 countries. They have given rise to national emissions targets and the regulations to back them, and it's created an industry. So everybody that's popping on with this has got a vested interest. It's their job. With these new regulations in force, the pressure on businesses to find ways to reduce the carbon footprint is growing. Most of today's interim solutions involve the use of the carbon market. But it's incorrect. What they've realised years ago is that if they use more gas, the emissions come down, which is why the United States no longer is emitting anything like what India and China are. And when America were, it were mainly in the industrial belts where they made old cars. Detroit, that's where you got to see little bits of red as CO2 emission. That's gone because they've emaciated the automobile industry in the United States. So they're lying from the get-go. What a carbon markets do is turn CO2 emissions into commodity by giving it a price. So really, the ones with all the money now, these carbon credits, should just be India and China. These emissions fall into one or two categories: carbon credits and carbon offsets. And they can both be bought and sold on the carbon market. It's a simple idea that provides a market-based solution to a thorny problem. Now you can understand why they've annihilated crypto. That was just a carrot to get this electronic idea of credits and offsets, so banking for you in this system, and it's got nothing to do with Bitcoin, etc., etc. What mugs have you been, chaps? What are carbon credits and carbon offsets? The terms are frequently used interchangeably, but carbon credits and carbon offsets operate on different mechanisms. Carbon credits, also known as carbon allowances, work like permission slips for emissions. Right? So if you want to cook a brew, you'll be counted for how many emissions it takes. If you want to go for a coffee outside a cafe, that again is created emissions, you're adding up. Yeah? Carbon credits, carbon revenue flows vertically from companies to regulators, though companies who end up with excess credits can sell them to other companies. Right? So if you end up with access, so if you're a good little doggy, and you stop drinking brews, you know, using your electric, using your gas, going out in your car, going on planes, etc., etc., unless, of course, you're the elite, you could actually end up with excess credits. How exciting is that? This God that they're putting in is just amazing, isn't it? What a fantastic God they're putting in over you on the lateral. Offsets flow horizontally. Oh, can you believe it? Well, without a premonition. Am I just a prophet or what? You know what I'm saying? What next word? Horizontally. Offsets flow horizontally, trading carbon revenue between companies. When one company removes a unit of carbon from the atmosphere as part of their normal business activity, they can generate a carbon offset. Other companies can then purchase that carbon offset to reduce their own carbon footprint. How about that? Can you see how this is game? It's just inventing. You thought fiat currency were worthless. This is absolute infantile primary school curriculum. Note that the two terms are sometimes used interchangeably, and carbon offsets are often referred to as offset credits. Still, this distinction between regulatory compliance credits and voluntary offsets should be kept in mind. How are carbon credits and offsets created? Credits and offsets form two slightly different markets, although the basic unit traded as the same. The equivalent of 1 tonne of carbon emissions, also known as CO2e. It's worth noting that a tonne of CO2 does refer to a lateral measurement of weight. You see where your Masonic's coming in here? Yeah, the square. This is this game. Just how much CO2 is in a tonne? The average American generates 16 tonnes of CO2 a year through driving, shopping, using electricity and gas at home, and generally going through the motions of everyday life. 16 tonnes. I mean, how pathetic is that? You can't even pick it up, CO2. Now, if you take on board what they're doing with the farming and putting cows up as emitting methane, which of course is another, and breathing CO2, you're going to be next on that. You'll only be able to breathe for so you won't be able to go out and run because you'll be breathing too much and puffing out CO2. Can you see where it's going to go if you're stupid enough to carry on earning a living playing in this shenanigans? To further put an emission into perspective, you would generate 1 tonne of CO2e by driving your average 22 mile per gallon car from New York to Las Vegas. Can you see how they've got it all? All this nonsense that they've got on about, oh, we want electric cars. Forget, they're not telling you that power stations have to create the electricity. Yeah? You know what I'm saying? You do just probably more. Because if they're going to electrify everything, which is what Lucifer said he would do, in order to take over, implement his world over the earth, it's going to be more fossil fuels being burnt, even though oil isn't a fossil fuel, in order to just keep this electrical grid going. We've already mentioned the Kyoto and Paris Agreements, which created the first international carbon markets. The state of the Paris Agreement. Countries by their participation in the Paris Agreement as of April the 21st, 2021. That's a lot, isn't it? There's only Greenland. How interesting. Now, another thing that's interesting as well is the British Isles beforehand were called Albion, but they were also called Thule. And Greenland is known in the occult circles as Thule. or Thule, whichever way you want to say it. Thule is the way we've always pronounced it, but I've heard some Americans call it Thule. It's like, what the fuck, are you trying to be posh all of a sudden, talk Queen's English? What? Come on, America. So that's a lot of green in it. Oh, wait a minute, the darker ones are ratified, but there's not the signed and not as, so the light ones are signed. So look how they've picked on all backward countries that have actually signed it. Everybody's ratified it, but only the second-rate nations have actually signed it up, and they're the ones being thrown out as immigrants everywhere. That is interesting, but look at we've got it here, you know, Levant. All this malarkey going on here. That's interesting because that's going to cover Iran and Iraq in it. So they've just been annihilated in war. Is that Libya? So are these conquered countries that have signed it? That's another interesting point. Is it not? That might take a bit of contemplating. So once you've been beaten half to death at war, then you signed it. But you didn't really sign it. You didn't have a choice because they'd annihilated your nation. So that's interesting. And the source for that map is UNFCCC. In the US, California operates its own carbon market and issues credits to residents for gas and electricity consumption. Well, is that why everybody's moved out of California, apart from the fruitcakes, the Bolsheviks? The number of credits issued each year is typically based on emission targets. Credits are frequently issued under what's known as cap and trade program. Regulators set a limit on carbon emissions, the cap. So the cap is the limits they set. The cap slowly decreases over time, making it harder and harder for business to stay within the cap. None of this is going on in China, remember, or India. Can you see this? This is what we're seeing when we look at Sunak. And I'm not saying when I've exposed Sunak, look at everybody that's an Indian as bad. They're not. However, the British Empire has used the Indian Raj in order to introduce its format in South Africa and Kenya and other African nations. They've used the British Raj contingent to implement the agenda of the British Empire, as they've done with the Pakistanis. Okay, because the components of the occupation. Which is why they had enough power to get them to vote and allow Tony Blair to take us to war in Afghanistan, in Iraq, because of course the mosques under this fake Sharia demanded they voted Labour in order to get the free handouts and they can continue the frauds. Which of course fraud and theft is against the law of the horse nation. Chaps, are you listening? Which the Quran tells you have to obey. So that's one, you didn't seek knowledge. That's two, you're not actually Muslims if you're following this, you kafir. And you know what your book says about that. So the cap slowly decreases over time. Unless you're in China and India. You can think of carbon credits as a permission slip for a company to emit up to a certain amount of CO2 that year. You know, they've got it on vegetables, cows, sheep. This controls all life. It controls everything. So when Lucifer said he'll take it over completely and steal your souls, this is where he's at, chaps, you know. Around the world, cap and trade programs exist in some form. In Canada, the EU, the UK, China, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, with many more countries and states considering implementation. Well, if it exists in China, it's a crock of shit, because they're the biggest polluter by far. And India also, but India hasn't played along with this, so British Raj setting itself up comfortably. Companies are thus incentivised to reduce the emissions their business operations produce to stay under their caps. In essence, the cap and trade programme lessens the burden for companies trying to meet emission targets in the short term and adds market incentives to reduce carbon emissions faster. So if you're a company and they're reducing these levels, you're going to be hunting down people that have spur credits. Yeah? Clever stuff. Carbon offsets work slightly differently. Organisations with operations that reduce the amount of carbon already in the atmosphere, say, by planting more trees or investing in renewable energy. So this is why all the trusts here are planting trees in direct contradiction to what the farmers say. So it's got nothing to do with trees and being nice for you. This is about them being able to sell credits to industrialised countries. It's clever stuff, which is why carbon offsets form what's known as the voluntary carbon market. It's involuntary. It's voluntary, but they're forcing it, remember. However, by buying these carbon offset, companies can measurably decrease the amount of CO2 they emit even further. What is the carbon marketplace? When it comes to the sale of carbon credits within the carbon marketplace, there are two significant separate markets to choose from. One is regulated market set up by cap and trade regulations at the regional and state levels. So that's your council executives, it's your county councils, yeah? So this is who your police are working for. Your Police and Crime Commission works for this system. Your now Chief Constable is chosen by the PCC. He's now operating for this cap and trade, not you. Which is why when the auditors go around, they keep telling them you're on private land. And then quickly shit themselves and change once they realise that they've just outed themselves because they're actually public buildings. Because we pay for them with taxpayers' money. And they're occupying them as a foreign force while they enforce policy instead of law. They're a foreign force on the land, and England says that they have to be annihilated. That's what England says. She's a good one, is our England. But of course, we're not promoting that idea because we're civilised. But if you go by English law, in the enforcement and service of law, as a militia, that means you, the public. It doesn't matter what colour you are, what you claim. You live on England. If you want to act as an English citizen, you have the law on your side to go and take over these police stations and council executives and any other two-bit tit-pot that's running for this system and put them in your own jails. Yeah, you don't need to go to court. You don't need to do anything. The court is held by a fact and definition of their actions. All you need to do as a militia is pick them up and imprison them. I mean, we've got mines. We've got plenty of mines that are still open. We can put them in there. Feed them vaccines. You know what I mean? Everything that they've enforced against you, we can feed it them. You know, we're not killing them because you're not allowed to kill. We're just giving them back what they've put out. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's where militia mind comes into play. You need to start thinking like this because this is what England sanctions. In the service of law, it's your duty. Yeah? When it comes to the regulatory market, each company operates under the cap and trade programme is issued a certain number of carbon credits each year. Some of those companies, yeah, who's issuing it on? Unelected what? Klaus Schwab's, Bill Gates, Fauci's, Hancock. I think you're falling for this, aren't you? I'm seeing Stockholm syndrome growing in this country with him. You're starting to feel sorry for the prick, aren't you? Some of these companies produce less emissions than the number of credits they're allotted, giving them a surplus of carbon credits. On the flip side, some companies, particularly those with older and less efficient operations, produce more emissions than the number of credits they receive each year they can cover. These businesses are looking to purchase carbon credits to offset their emissions because they must. Well, again, I'm going to redo these emissions maps so you can see the reality and truth of it and how this is just based on absolute bullshit. Because none of us, except India and China, are emitting any CO2 to be concerned about, you know. So there's a little picture of the market. Emitter B, emitter A, purchase, sale. So real GHC emissions, real GHC emissions. So they're pumping it out. They're not doing so bad. They're selling it to them. So in essence then, on that game, that's going to constantly be coming down and they're going to be constantly coming down till there is no more industry. You'll own nothing and be happy. Yeah? So when they say these things, you know, they're not just taking the piss. They're serious. Most major companies are doing the part or will have announced a blueprint to minimise the carbon footprint. However, the amount of carbon credits allocated to them each year, which is based on business size and efficiency of the operations relative to industry benchmarks, may not be enough to cover the needs. Regardless of technological advances, some companies are years away from reducing their emissions substantially. Yet they still have to keep providing goods and services in order to generate the cash they need to improve the carbon footprints of their operations. Well, that's a bit odd, isn't it? They're putting cash in there. There wasn't going to be any, is it? As such, you need to find a way to offset the amount. The difference between the voluntary and the compliance markets. Now, this might be interesting. The voluntary market works a bit differently. Companies in this marketplace have the opportunity to work with businesses and individuals who are environmentally conscious and are choosing to offset carbon emissions because they want to. There is nothing mandated here. So that's for the fruit bats. It says it might be an environmentally conscious company that wants to demonstrate that they are doing the part to protect the environment, or it can be an environmentally conscious person who wants to offset the amount of carbon they're putting into the air when they travel. Well, obviously, none of these people that are running around to all these meetings give two shits about reducing their offset because they're driving gas guzzlers, they're private jets, blah blah blah, because they're important. They're important infants. So, for example, 221, the oil giant Shell announced the company aims to offset 120 million tonnes of emissions by 2030. Regardless of their reasoning, companies are looking for ways to participate. So basically, if you want to set up an oil company, you don't really have to get involved in this, and we don't have to give a shit what Shell's doing, because we can start doing it. So Texas, you Texans, just start all your own companies again. You don't have to jump into this because it's not mandated. You can do what you want and tell us all what we need and what we want. We hate this nonsense. Regardless of the reasoning, companies are looking for ways to participate, are they? No. Well, top carbon companies stock EFTFs. We list out top 3 carbon companies 2020. Sorry, right. Overall size of carbon. Hang on. These are the best carbon stocks. Oh, so they want to invest in that stock. Yes, no wonder they're demolishing the stock market. The voluntary carbon market is difficult to measure. The cost of carbon credits varies, particularly for carbon offsets, since the value is linked closely to the perceived quality of the issuing company. Third-party validators add a level of control to the process, guaranteeing that each carbon offset actually results from the real-world emissions reductions. Well, we've already done it, and now they're trying to take away gas. Gas is what gave us the ability in the West to reduce our emissions in the US and across Europe and here. And now they're trying to take that off you because of what they're doing with the shit show theatre between Vlad the Impaler and Zelensky. You really don't want to be looking at that Ukraine now as anything other than what it is, guys. It's a show. And it's a shit show because a lot of people are dying in the Ukraine. And a lot of Russian soldiers are dying as well. Well, the voluntary carbon market was estimated to be worth about 400 million last year. Forecast place the value of the sector between 10 to 25 billion by 2030. Yeah, if you jump on like dipsticks. Depending on how aggressively countries around the world pursue their wind and rain targets. So this is the speculation. So here we are at 2025. That's where we want to be staying. We want to go that way. Really, don't we? Not that way. So look, they're nowhere with this stuff. So all this that you've just experienced in 3 years is to get us to 225. And that's still only a tiny little step up. They're nowhere near getting this game going. You farmers, stop acting like your little children. Oh, what can we do? Supermarkets. You've been supplying to supermarkets, you dumbasses. It's your own fault. You know, you've got vans. Start to deliver. Start to sell local again. It means you're going to have to get off your fat asses and do a little bit. You're going to have to think as well. I know you're not the brightest, but your wife might be. Or your kid's not educated. Can you not? Your kids not think out of this. You know, you farmers playing this, oh, poor me, forget it. You chose your path. You put yourself under this system. And all you're doing at the moment is crying your eyeballs out like everybody else has to sort out this problem for you. Get a grip, lads. Start becoming a bit more industrious again and start selling local. Get off your ass and start delivering back at 5 o'clock in the morning. Stop being soft asses and crying your eyeballs out. And stop letting DEFRA medicate your animals. Why is a farmer growing feed for his animals? What's the land for? If you're not using it correctly, you should lose it. No farmer should be buying feed for his animals. You bone-eyes old lady, get lazy get. You should be growing it. You know, you call yourself farmers, you're pathetic. You know, get a grip, you infants. Despite the difficulties, analysts agree that participation in the voluntary carbon market is growing rapidly. Is it? Well, you would say that, but that little graph here says it's not. How to produce carbon credits. Many different types of businesses can create and sell carbon credits by reducing, capturing or storing emissions through different processes. Some of the most popular types of carbon offsetting projects include renewable energy projects, improving energy efficiency, carbon and methane capture and sequestration, land and use and reforestation. Now, improving energy efficiency, and I've said it before, all the housing trusts didn't improve the energy efficiency, they killed it because we had electricity and we had the ability to put one gas fire on. Now, they've got condenser boilers which cost you a fortune just to condense, and they put all the properties just on gas for heating. So you can't just put a gas fire on in a housing association property anymore. So they didn't improve energy efficiency, did they? They breached contract. Which is why I've been trying to get hold of the contract between Ironburn Council and what is now, I forgot what it's called, but it was Ironburn Homes, then it went to Symphony and it's come up somewhere else now. They won't give it me. They've no chance they will ever give it me. Okay, the courts are supporting them in everything. I worked hard to try and get that data because I know they failed and breached the contract. That trust should be disbanded and all the properties put back into council hands. Then we need to get rid of the executives because they're the Johnny-come-latelys and get our councils back to we get vote people in to represent us in our town. We pay council tax to our town and we demand how it's spent. Now that's what we need to be demanding to get rid of the stakeholder offset credit shit. So we don't need to go through them because it's just a load of shit and more shit and it'll just piss us off. How companies can offset carbon emissions. There are countless ways. Investing in renewable energy by funding wind, hydro, geothermal, solar power generation is perceived to fund it. Improving energy efficiency across the world, for instance, by providing more efficient cook stores to those living in rural and more impoverished regions. Just gets them into you. If you're out there in rural, this will get you into your under contracts. They'll be telling you what to do in a bit. Yeah. And they're getting rid of your pets, by the way, through the vets and the medications as part of this agenda. Because what did they breathe out? Promoting forest regrowth. There you are, farmers. That's what it's all about. And switching to alternative fuel types, such as lower carbon biofuels like corn and biomass-derived ethanol and biodiesel. So them dipsticks at City Road, you know, maybe we should run them over. Because they're playing into this game. And of course, I'm only joking. I wouldn't suggest anybody runs anybody over. But don't feel sorry for these half-wit baby boomer fruitcakes that think it's a good idea to lie flat at road. I'm sorry, darling. That's against common custom. Alright? Common custom says you don't obstruct the highway. Only the police and ambulances do that because they think they're on the road and you agree with them. If you're wondering how carbon offset and allotment levels are valued and determined through these processes, take a deep breath. Monitoring emissions and reductions can be a challenge for even the most experienced professional. Excuse me. Know that when it comes to regulation of voluntary markets, there are third-party auditors. I'll bet there is. Who verify, collect and analyse data to confirm the validity of each offset project. Now then, third-party auditors. Charitable, PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of them, Deloitte as they are now. They're the ones that audit your councils and then say, you're a great council. Don't worry everybody, this council is so fantastic, we don't know how they do it. Yeah, Ironburn Council puts itself up as that. We are a great council or whatever bullshit they talk because they were audited by the mates in Manchester. Of course, Salford is CI5 headquarters. MI5 headquarters. So MI5 are auditing this. So your intelligence service, they're not running around saving you from being invaded. They're helping it and making sure of it. And they're also going to bum you if you breathe out too many times or have too many beans on toast. Or insects. Now you're not too bad with insects, I like that because you only have to stir fry them for about 10 seconds. So your carbon footprint is low. Do you know what I'm saying to you? So it's important. Carbon credits internationally add an extra onus to businesses. In return, the best cap and trade programs provide a clear framework for reducing carbon emissions. Not all programs are created equal, of course, but the best carbon credits have a clear impact. Of course they're not equal. China and India are running riot. The two types of global carbon markets, voluntary and compliance. So, compliance or regulated, markets of carbon credits created by the need to comply with a regulatory act. Emission trading systems, ETS. Also referred to as cap and trade. So the cap and trade are the compliance. So if your arsehole government signs up to cap and trade, it means then you have to comply. Right? So that's something we need to understand as well. Because we've all heard the cap and trade, but none of us had a clue what they were talking about. Cap and trade equals you're going to be forced to do it. Climate policy targets of its jurisdictional members. Allowances are freely allocated and auctioned to companies which can then trade allowances to comply with the cap on their emissions. So who gets the percentage as an auctioneer? Oh, I bet it's charitable, by the way. Companies that lower emissions can sell their extra allowances to larger emitters. So cap and trade is, you've got to do it. Voluntary is corporations, government, individuals volunteer to offset their emissions by purchasing carbon credits. So the term carbon credit is voluntary. Cap and trade is compulsory because your idiot ass white government signed you in. Global compliance market. The global compliance market for carbon credits is massive. According to Refinitiv, the total market size is US 261 billion, representing 10.3 GT CO2, equivalent traded on the entire company markets in 2020 on the compliance market. It's just so bullshit. Why is the US paying all that when it's not giving any emissions? You're not putting any emissions out, guys. It's a complete joke. Mandatory schemes limit the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted have proliferated, and with them a fragmented carbon compliance market is developing. For example, the European Union has an emissions trading system, ETS, that enables companies to buy carbon credits from other companies. You mark my words, all you that have lost in your crypto, they're going to go, oh look guys, come in here, come and join this one. Trading systems, emissions trading system. I mean, you're so gullible. It's easy for them. They just laugh at you. California runs its own cap and trade program, and 9 states in the eastern seaboard have formed their own cap and trade conglomerate, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Companies with low emissions can sell their extra allowances to larger emitters, blah blah blah. The voluntary carbon market offsets its smaller and compliance market, but expected to grow much bigger in the coming years. It's open to individuals, companies and organisations that want to reduce and eliminate the carbon footprint, but are not necessarily required by law. I like that, not required by law. Voluntary carbon market. The green is credits issued. Black, credits retired. So here we are. Why has it gone down? Oh yeah, everybody were on lockdown, weren't they? Which is interesting, because somebody was saying the other day that they had some data that was suggesting that more people died in road traffic accidents in 2021 than ever. Why? When everybody were in kennel. It's interesting. It's very interesting. It probably means then that police, ambulances, taxi drivers and all the, what do they call them, nurses, doctors, arsewipes I think they call them, don't they? Oh, no, they don't call them that. What do they call them? I forgot. But you know what I'm saying. So basically, if that's the case, because they were only idiots driving around, they're obviously shit drivers, aren't they? Good at bullying folk and taking orders that are nonsense, but they're not very good at driving. Corporate social responsibility, CSR. Consumers are increasingly aware of the importance of carbon emissions. Consequently, they're increasing critical companies that don't take, like, the fruit bats are. Opportunity. No, we're not going to read any more of this because it's doing my boxing. But I think you get the picture of how it's playing out. So there's voluntary and compulsory. But the way the government goes, because it keeps signing into all these cap and trades, it becomes compulsory on your person. So if your person's driving the car, they can bum you. If you're driving the car as a flesh and blood man, they can't do shit. You know? But of course they control all fuel. But of course, if Texas, you know what I'm saying, guys? Set up your own companies, we'll buy off you. We'll buy it off you. You know, shipping companies, set your own up. We'll buy off you only. We'll get sideline this garbage. It's absolutely insidious. So I've had enough of that because it's boring me to death. So I don't want to do any more of that. I'm sorry. Right, so let me see what time it is because we've got some other data I want to just look at. And if time, we'll have a look at some definitions. Where are we at? 1:30. So that's that diatribe. It's just garbage, isn't it? It's absolute infantile pish. It really is. How people get excited about it is because they've not read that. They're not savvy with how it works and what it's about. Right, what are you lot on about? Oh, you're being naughty? I think you're not being naughty, aren't you? Right, so we need to go back to this. And I need to transition that. Pull that out. Pull that out. Now then. So that's the man that's in back at Donald Trump. Alright? Sheldon Adelson. And you have to kiss his ring piece. Yeah? When they're not looking. When nobody's looking, he has another ring. So that's what that's about, and that's Trump's. You look at Donald Trump, that's who you're looking at. That's who you're talking to. Now then, we're going to give you an insight into Chabad Lubavitch. Alright? So, Israel election, this is what they were saying. This is a piece on Chabad Lubavitch. God as surgeon. Right, so if you've got ancestors that died in the Holocaust, you need to listen to this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe Rabbi Menachem Schneerson described the Holocaust by comparing God to a surgeon who amputates a patient's limb in order to save his life. The panel discussion on Haredim and the Holocaust, recently aired on Channel 1, should have included the views of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Shabbat, so-called King Messiah. So this Rabbi Menachem Schneerson is classed as the Holy Grail of Chabad Lubavitch, yeah? So they're saying here, so this is in Israel, guys, this is Jewish people talking to Jews and saying, well, hang on a minute, this should have been included, guys, because this is what this lot really are. So on the subject of the Holocaust, the Rebbe wrote as follows: it is clear that no evil descends from above, and buried within torment and suffering is a core of exalted spiritual good. Not all human beings are able to perceive it, but it is very much there. So it is not impossible for the physical destruction of the Holocaust to be spiritually beneficial. On the contrary, it's quite possible that physical affliction is good for the spirit. Mada Viamuna Matjon Lubavitch, 1980, Kafar Shabbat. Kafar, so that's where that comes from. Schneerson goes on to compare God to a surgeon who amputates a patient's limb in order to save his life. The limb is incurably diseased. The Holy One's blessed be he, like the professor surgeon seeks the good of Israel. And indeed, all he does is done for the good. In the spiritual sense, no harm was done because the everlasting spirit of the Jewish people was not destroyed. Did you hear what he's saying to you there? Right? So he's saying, get this clear. The Holocaust that happened in Germany, whatever however you see it, according to Chabad Lubavitch, was ordained by God. Right? So nobody has any room to moan about it. Yet, right? This is the key to it. Right? The Rebbe's stance, therefore, is clear. The Holocaust was a good thing because it lobbed off a disease-ravaged limb of the Jewish people. In other words, the millions who perished in the Holocaust in order to cleanse the Jewish people of its sins. Remember, this is a Chabad leader saying this. Now, keep that in mind, right? Hang on, we'll go a bit more. There's a logic in this theology. If God is indeed omnipotent, knows everything and controls the world, God presides over the trials of 4 billion people all day long, every day, without a moment's rest, which implies divine supervision on an individual and collective basis, then the Holocaust took place not only with his knowledge, but also with his approval. Right? Now, I want you to keep that in mind, because according to this, then, everything that happened in the Holocaust wasn't the fault of the Germans, wasn't the fault of the Nazis. God did it. It wasn't the fault of Hitler. God did it, right? So God was behind Hitler, is what he's saying. However, let's just look at the contradiction of these fruit bats. What have they done to Germany since the end of the Second World War? They've blamed the German people. They've demanded reparations from the German people. They've demanded reparations from every ally in the World War. These people. Because they blamed the Jews. They blamed the Germans. They blamed everybody. Yeah? So can you see the contradiction? On the one hand, God did it, but on the other hand, no, it's your fault, give us your money. That term reparation, which I said, keep in mind, because this is what they've just agreed now. That we, our tax, you and me, have to pay more money to any country that claims to have been damaged to do with wind and rain change. Can you see the nonsense of this? And also, this is the group fronting and pushing the Snow-Hide system on behalf of the Babylonian priesthood. Yeah? Do you see what I'm saying here? Sneeson does not accept the idea of Hest upon him or God's face being turned away. To explain why he was not present when 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered, according to some religious Jews, the Hest upon him was a consequence of man's sins, and above all, the sins of the Jewish people. Sneeson says that God was there and that he wanted the Holocaust to happen because it is inconceivable, in his view, for God to commit evil. He portrays the Holocaust as a positive event, all the more so for the Jews. So can you see, they're going to be at the top. It's not evil what happened, and they're going to be controlling the Sanhedrin over everybody that's not of this priesthood. So even if you're a Jewish person, if you don't obey this shit, you won't be classed as such. You've got to start to see this, folks. After this text was published in the summer of 1980, kicking up a storm, Chabad claimed it was based on an inaccurate Hebrew translation of talks that the Rebbe delivered in Yiddish. The Rebbe, they said, had no idea his marks were being published. Well, yeah, I bet he didn't. That's why he said it. They're very good at that. Saying things that they mean, that's real, but they never expect somebody that sat there listening to it that would whistleblow it. And that's been going on for a long time, and it's the reason we know so much about this, what's really going on within these numpties. He says his remarks, Sneerson explained, were based on the Torah. Hitler was a messenger of God in the same sense that Nebuchadnezzar is called God's servant in the book of Jeremiah. Yeah, Old Testament. Garden God, the Lord God of the garden. The surgery he spoke of, it's just mass corrective procedure, that the suffering, i.e. the murder of the Jews, was minor compared to its curative effect. Now that's interesting because you study the setting up of Israel, overseen by the British military, and the British military commanders were going absolutely apeshit, saying, do not allow any of these Russian Jews to come anywhere near Israel. Right? They were killing English soldiers, torturing English soldiers, blowing up their own ships full of their own for the sympathy vote, for the reparations. Can you see the contradiction? We saw the contradiction in Pope Francis, the other live stream. Here we're seeing the contradiction from the get-go in the actual theology of this bunch, Chabad Lubavitch. And we've just seen, have we not, on their own websites, bigging up Zelensky, bigging up Putin. Yeah? As operating according to this shit. Now we don't need to read anymore. You get the message. You get the message with that. Do you not? So I'll just get rid of these. You know, there you go. It's there for you to see. And they're showing us. So we're not conspiratorial. There's nothing conspiratorial at all about what's going on here. Not a bit. This is fact. And it's from their own their own data. Right, let me just come back in here. Okay. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pull on myself. So it's me again, the ugly one. Do, bang, understanding. Right, no, I've done it wrong because I'm rubbish. No, we don't want that. We want. Oh, it's not coming up. That's unusual. There we go. I've got it. No. So, last 20 minutes here, we'll go through a few maxims so that I know people you like your law. This was put together 2020, September 18th, by Jeff Vile, ValeLaw.com. The 20 Maxims of Equity. He says this article is part of the Vale Law's open source litigation and legal risk management checklist. Okay. It says equity is an ancient judicial system originating in England by which courts apply principles of general fairness in situations where application of the common law would bring about injustice. Article 3 of the US Constitution extends the judicial power of courts to both cases in law and in equity. While the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure combined law and equity into a single type of suit, the civil action, in 1938 the distinction between law and equity is still very much alive. Claims in equity afford different remedies, do not permit a right to trial by jury under the 7th Amendment. Indeed, equitable claims must be decided by the judge, even if a jury is deciding other claims at law. So this is Chancery here, isn't it? King's Bench. And equitable remedies are generally unavailable when there is an adequate remedy at law. While they do not constitute binding precedent in US courts, equitable claims and courts that preside over them are traditionally guided by the 20 maxims of equity, which are certainly persuasive precedent. The 11th Circuit was kind enough to recently gather 13 of these maxims in one place in Slater versus US Steel Court, but of course we pride ourselves in creating a more comprehensive list. One who seeks equity must do equity. This is perhaps one of the most basic maxims of equity. Simply put, a party petitioning the court for equitable relief must be willing to fulfill all of its own obligations. 2. Equity will not suffer a wrong to be without a remedy. The equitable power of the court is not bound by cast iron rules, but exists to do fairness, and is flexible and adaptive to particular exigencies, so that relief will be granted when, in view of all circumstances, to deny it will permit one party to suffer a gross wrong at the hands of the other. And obviously they're quoting, so I'll put this up anyway, so we don't need to quote case law. 3. Equity regards as done what ought to be done. It is a fiction of equity designed to effectuate the obvious intention of the parties and to promote justice. 4. Equity is a sort of equality, as the FMCRA is silent on the question of priority. And as equity is equality, we find that the proper course here is to distribute the limited funds on a rateable basis, such that each claimant receives a share of the fund proportionate to their share of the total judgment figure. Okay, so these are not being carried out, are they, when they take us before these magistrates' court, the Star Courts? Equity aids the vigilant and not those who slumber in their rights. This is the basis, that's clever. Equity aids the vigilant and not those who slumber on their rights. So when you go in a magistrate court, that's what they're playing against you. If you're not vigilant, you're lost. Yeah? Because there's all equity in them places. This is the basis for the equitable defence of laches. And then again, it gives you case law. 6. Equity imputes an intent to fulfil an obligation. Near performance of a general obligation is sufficient unless the law requires perfect performance. Alright, so I'll do that again. Near performance of a general obligation is sufficient unless the law requires perfect performance. Equity acts in personam. Equity acts on the duties of people, not objects. Or equity acts in personam, not in rem. And then it gives you case law again. Equity abhors a forfeiture. Largely foreclosed, pun intended, today by statute. The original theory was that if one failed to make a payment for property received on time and had that property seized by law, they could pay back the debt late and recover the property in equity. Today it may be more important to understand the exception to the general rule that equity abhors a forfeiture, which states that forfeiture is favoured when, instead of working a loss or injury contrary to equity, it promotes justice and equity and protects the owner against the indifference, laches, and injurious conduct of the lessee. Equity does not require an idle gesture. If the employer desires reinstatement for strategic purposes, that is a valid basis for denial. Equity does not engage in idle gestures, and the court will not order plaintiff to work as a material handler at Volvo without it being unambiguously clear that she still wants this job. These are interesting points. He who comes into equity must come with clean hands. The equitable defence of unclean hands requires that he who comes into equity must come with clean hands. 11. Equity delights to do justice, not by halves. At the remedy stage, a violation having been established, it may be appropriate to resolve marginal doubts against the wrongdoers. Courts should not be grouding in remedying injustice. Equity delights to do justice and not by halves. Equity will take jurisdiction to avoid a multiplicity of suits. Good luck today with this one. While the spirit of this maxim may remain alive, it has largely been subsumed by rules concerning MDL, class actions, collective actions, and case law on the topic. This case does not come within the principle that equity will take jurisdiction to avoid a multiplicity of suits. 13. Equity follows the law. As Justice Story explained, where a rule of the statute law is direct and governs the case with all its circumstances, or the particular points a court of equity is as much bound by it as a court of law. So that's interesting as well. So if you're thinking chancery, these are the sort of things you're going to have to start to get on board. 14. Equity will not assist a volunteer. An unjust enrichment claim will not lie. However, if the benefit is conferred by a volunteer or intermeddler, so that ends that. And conversely, in restitution claims, equity will not create a quasi-contract to a promisee if no consideration was provided. And that's a volunteer in 18th century English. 15. Equity will not complete an imperfect gift. Equity will not make a trust where none has been clearly declared. A defective or imperfect gift will not be converted into a trust. 16. Where equities are equal, the law will prevail. In any event, the equity of the taxpayer is no greater than that of the United States. And when equities are equal, the legal title will prevail. Interesting. 17. Between equal equities, the first in order of time shall prevail. The general principle with regard to real property is first in time, first in right. Comparing timing with legal and equitable claims under the common law, an earlier claim had priority over a later claim if both claims were legal claims. The same was true if both claims were equitable. Order in time only mattered under the common law, where one party had a legal claim and a competing earlier claim to the property was purely equitable. So that might work. That might be interesting data if you're looking to start doing the lien process. 18. Equity will not allow a statute to be used as a cloak for fraud. Now that's interesting again. So when they go, on the road this act, on the road this act, If it's against equity, it means nothing. Courts of equity, independently of any statute, will relieve against fraud. And it's all fraud, isn't it? Coppers are fraud, councils are fraud, magistrates are using fraud, lawyers are using fraud, and I'll say that again. Equity will not allow a statute to be used as a court for fraud. Right? Courts of equity, independently of any statute, will relieve against fraud if proceedings are reasonably brought after its discovery, or seasonably. Indeed, to use the language of Lord Cottenham, a court of equity will wrest property fraudulently acquired, not only from the perpetrator of the fraud, but from his children and his children's children, or, as was said in another case, from any person to whom he may have parcelled out the fruits of his fraud. Now that's interesting. So that's your liens against. If a copper defrauds you by not accepting you've made your standing as man, everything he gains then is on a fraud. If a judge refuses to allow you to stand as man, yeah, anything that comes after is based on a fraud, and on and on and on. Council tax, yeah, income tax, yeah. They're all based on frauds. There's your lien data. Excellent. 19. Equity will not allow a trust to fail for want of a trustee. Even if a trustee dies before the creation of a testamentary trust, for example, or if the trustee is incompetent at the time she accepts the position, these failures would not cause the creation of the trust to fail. That is very important for all you guys out there that have got trusts. Let me have another look at that. As a trustee dies for it. How would that work with person? I don't know. I might have to think about that again. 20. Equity regards the beneficiary as the true owner. Right? And this is equity. So these are the things you need to really understand if you're going to start to move off being person and acting, knowing, with an interest in it as man, yeah? As bettler. Settler beneficiary. I'll say that again. 20. Equity regards the beneficiary as the true owner. Another historical maxim that no longer applies. Common law once provided no action by the beneficiary of a trust against the trustee, but that has since changed with the common law claim for breach of fiduciary duty. Right, so yeah, that makes sense, the fiduciary side of things, which is why we've discussed that if you were you're operating as beneficiary and you're making it clear to either police or judge or anybody, they're all, because they're civil servants, they're holding a fiduciary obligation. So that's not bad that the fiduciary side of it's actually taking it over. So there you go, chaps. I'm not even going to read your stuff because it looks like you're all talking to yourself. So that's good. I'm glad you've had a good teamwork. I hope that's good data for you, but at least now we have a bit more of an in-depth idea of what this cap and trade, omissions, voluntary. We have an idea now of what it is that Jalco, Westminster and other animals are pushing out everywhere. You know, in America, Australia, everywhere except India. Take note, British Raj. We've sussed you. We're onto you. And we're going to bite your ass off. We're going to make sure everybody understands what the hell is going on in old Blighty. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. The last Sunday in November. Here we are. Next one, we're into the Christmas spirit, my golly. Oh, and a bottle of rum. No, that's pirates, isn't it? Alright, I'll have to rethink some Christmassy kind of shindigs for chat like. Anyway, I will say to you, thanks for joining, thanks for taking part. More importantly, I hope you have a good week. Till the next time.
electronic